have good dispensing practice, you have good manufacturing practice, and
Oh
you have
yeah, and
good
GPhC.
distribution practice.
Good
So
point.
this all comes from
It's quality control, isn't it?
quality control, yeah. So, but it all comes from this document, guys. If I can get it. And it's published by the Royal Society. This is going to become more popular over
Okay.
time because I don't know if you guys know, but there's a new GPhC inspection protocol. So they used to just go into a pharmacy and like, oh yeah, this is all right, this is all right, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
it used to be quite easy to have
Mm-hmm.
these kind of inspections. As long as you're a pharmacy and you weren't killing anyone, they're pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
But they've changed it, and you have to make sure that you abide by the good dispensing guidelines. And it's really stuff you already know, um,
Oh.
but it concentrates on confidentiality. I'd be
Mm-hmm.
surprised if there isn't an exam question on confidentiality. They like talking about communication skills, patient choice, EPS. What's EPS, guys?
It's the electronic prescription
Yeah.
service.
So it's the electronic transmission of prescriptions
Mm-hmm.
straight to the pharmacy. It doesn't exist in Ireland at the moment.
That doesn't.
No, there's some weird guidance in Ireland that you can't have electronic prescriptions.
We get an awful lot of faxed prescriptions,
Yeah.
maybe in from a doctor, but technically speaking, you can't, like legally, that's not a legal prescription, so you can't dispense it. But obviously, ethically, you have to give the patient something.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So lots of the time you would give the patient like a 5-day emergency supply, but that's kind of as electronic as it gets.
Yeah. And how long do you have to wait before you get a prescription? What's the maximum amount of time?
Well, you see, if we only give the patient, well, depending what it is, if it's tablets and you only give them a 5-day supply, the patient will come back the next day.
Yeah.
But because you're not supposed to be dispensing at all, there isn't really like a legal, there isn't really a thing to say that you should furnish the prescription within 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
We would get, say, if it was for like a cream or a bottle of something, and it was a repeat prescription, we get patients coming in all the time and they'll just come in again and again, oh, but it's a fax prescription, it's a prescription, it's a prescription. And it's like, no, it's not a legal prescription. And there's an awful lot of confusion to the patient as well, because they don't understand that they think that if a doctor faxes a prescription to the pharmacy, they think it's perfectly legit, and they don't have to go and get the original from the doctor. Like, we are always asking the doctor to post a prescription to us, this, that, and the other, and even the doctors don't realise that it's not a legal prescription.
Well, there's
so it's a very
apparently
rare.
It's like a big thing in pharmacy in Ireland that there's lots of like bikes and delivery men who go around picking up prescriptions all the time.
Oh.
Yeah.
That. Okay.
Well, I haven't seen it myself.
No.
And I work in a chain pharmacy myself, and it's something that we don't do.
Okay.
Because it's just something we don't do. Some of the bigger chains are wanting to kind of introduce it, but there's a lot of like the smaller independents that kind of don't do that sort of thing, and they don't, like, we have a delivery service where we deliver a prescription to a patient, but we don't go and pick up the prescription for them from the doctor or anything like that, because it's kind of cutting out the patient too much.
Yeah, it's costly as well.
But, it's not as big. Maybe it is bigger with the bigger chains, but I haven't seen it too much now myself.
What about a controlled drug, Claire? So, can they fax over a prescription of a controlled drug and then you dispense of it? Say it's the concentrate Oromorph.
It would depend. This again, it's illegally. The answer is no.
Yeah. Good.
But ethically, that's where the problem fits in. It's the ethical thing. It depends on the situation. It depends on a patient. I mean, if you are talking about like a Friday night, and so like the doctors, wherever they're closed the weekend, and it's a patient who is always on this medication, and something was faxed over, you have to, like, obviously legally you can say absolutely no way, I'm not dispensing that, but then you have to look at the situation as a whole, and there's the ethical side of it, which overrules an awful lot here. And
we talked about this a lot though, in that the difference between the exam and what you do in practice, like, is huge, isn't it?
Huge.
Yeah.
It's huge, because we got in the Pharmacy Act 2007, which was kind of to rule out all of that. But then you see you've got the patients who would have always got something without a prescription before, and always would have got this before. And I mean, we've got patients, you know, who's like, oh, well, for years and years and years, I got my prescription faxed in, and you've never had a problem with it. And it's like, yeah, but that's only because it was kind of an overlooked thing, whereas now it's much more kind of set in stone that it's something like that is not a legal prescription and we can't do it. But then the ethical side of it is huge as well, and you can't turn around to a patient who has always been on morphine tablets for whatever reason, and can you say, no, I'm going to leave you with nothing for the weekend?
Yeah.
You know, you've got that side of it as well that you have to kind of look into.
This is interesting. So standard operating procedures, whose responsibility is it to implement standard operating procedures within a pharmacy?
Superintendent.
So that's like the main thing that the superintendent does, make sure that it's called clinical governance, making sure that the clinical governance of the pharmacy is set up, and that everyone's kind of read and signed the standard operating procedures. You know, again, when we were talking about the difference between practice and reality, practice and the actual exam itself. You know that if you are a locum and then you go into different shops, so you work for Boots or you work for Asda or an independent, you have to read every single SOP and sign it within each of those pharmacies. So I worked as a locum when I first started out. I locumed in about 100 different pharmacies around London and the UK. And every new place I had to go to, I had to read, maybe about 30, 40, 20-page documents. And then I had to sign it at the end. So that, if I did that in every place, and I pretty much did, it took me like an hour and a half every single time. It's a bit ridiculous. And there's no real difference between SOPs. Everyone has kind of proprietary SOPs, but usually they come from one of the Newmark or NPA or Avicenna. But it's your duty, if you're working in a pharmacy, to be familiar with the standard operating procedures and then make sure you sign it. This document's very boring. Visit pharmacycpa.com for the full video series. As always, for more information, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, join our free PCPA course, join our Facebook group, or subscribe to our blog.